It was supposed to be the ultimate ironclad eviction, the final non-negotiable line drawn in the ancient turf of the British monarchy. For years, the public demanded standard accountability, asking how long a man stripped of his royal titles, his military honors, and his public dignity could remain insulated inside a 30-room mansion paid for by taxpayers and historical privilege. When King Charles III finally pulled the trigger, serving formal notice, severing the private security budget, and exiling his younger brother to the windswept, fog-drenched floodplains of Norfolk, the palace signaled to the world that the scandal was contained. They declared that Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor would fade quietly into the background of Marsh farm, living out his remaining years far away from the cameras, the headlines, and the devastating fallout of his past. They promised the British public that the era of special treatment was over. They insisted that the gates were locked, the royal ties were severed, and the shadow hanging over the House of Windsor had finally been lifted. But late last night, the carefully constructed narrative exploded into absolute chaos. Leaked high-definition security camera footage, captured directly from the perimeter of the Sandringham estate, has just hit the internet, and what it shows has sent shockwaves through the corridors of Buckingham Palace. This isn't just a simple snapshot of a fallen royal going for an early morning walk. This is damning, undeniable video evidence that captures Andrew caught dead in the act of violating the explicit terms of his banishment, operating a shadow network right beneath the king's nose, and conducting business that the palace desperately tried to convince you no longer existed. The footage, spanning multiple hours of raw, time-stamped recording, reveals unmarked vehicles arriving under the cover of darkness, high-value assets being transferred out of sight, and face-to-face exchanges that directly contradict every single press statement issued by Buckingham Palace over the last 6 months. Tonight, we are tearing back the curtain on the Marsh farm footage. We are breaking down frame by frame what the royal family tried to hide, why senior aides are panicking in emergency crisis meetings, and why this single video might be the absolute breaking point that forces King Charles to take actions he never wanted to take. To truly understand how explosive this newly surfaced footage is, you have to look at the lie the institution sold to the public just months ago, when the royal family announced the total removal of Andrew's status, forcing his transition from the majestic royal lodge in Windsor Great Park down to the isolated 5-bedroom property known as Marsh Farm on the Sandringham estate. It was framed as a severe, unyielding punishment. We were told that Andrew was effectively living like a hermit. The media painted a picture of a broken, disgraced former prince, sitting alone in a cold Norfolk farmhouse, stripped of his staff, denied his private security detail, and completely cut off from the levers of influence he once wielded without restraint. Royal commentators paraded across television screens claiming that the monarchy had finally modernized, proving that no one, not even the king's own brother, was above the law or immune to public outrage. We were told Marsh Farm was a glorified leper colony, a physical representation of royal exile surrounded by 6-foot security fencing, camera rigs, and marshland. The narrative was neat, clinical, and total. Andrew was out, the king was in control, and the crown was safe. But raw footage does not lie. And what this newly exposed security tape proves is that the narrative of the humbled, isolated exile was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated public relations illusion designed to quiet public fury while allowing Andrew to maintain his lifestyle behind high walls. Let's dive into the specifics of what the footage actually shows. The video begins at precisely 2:14 a.m. The camera angle, mounted on a structural post along the secondary access road leading toward Marsh Farm, captures a blacked-out commercial van pulling up to the side gates of the property. There are no royal crests, no official markings, and no police escorts. But as the driver steps out, the security perimeter gates automatically open. Access that is strictly restricted under the updated security protocol implemented by the Crown Estate. For 20 minutes, the footage reveals a series of heavy, unmarked wooden crates and customized metallic flight cases being unloaded from the vehicle. These aren't personal belongings being unpacked from a routine domestic move. The shape, size, and specialized handling of these crates match the exact physical profiles of high-value artwork, archival documentation, and private luxury assets that were supposedly catalogued, frozen, or surrendered during the official audit of Royal Lodge earlier this year. And then at 2:38 a.m., the key figure appears on screen. Walking out from the side entrance of the farmhouse, dressed in a dark coat, is Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor himself. He isn't standing by passively. He is actively directing the crew, inspecting the contents of the crates under handheld lights, and overseeing the offloading of these unverified items directly into the secure outbuildings of the Sandringham property. Why does this matter? Because when King Charles cut off Andrew's public funding and forced the surrender of Royal Lodge, a strict mandate was established. All assets tied to official royal residences were to undergo standard inventory checks to ensure no state-owned property, crown historical items, or unaccounted financial materials were removed without oversight. The presence of non-scheduled, middle-of-the-night deliveries moving directly into Andrew's private possession destroys the palace's claim that his financial and physical footprint is being monitored. Even more disturbing is what happens at the end of the tape. Just before 3:00 a.m., a second vehicle pulls up to the Marsh farm perimeter. A male figure in plain clothes steps out, hands Andrew a thick, sealed document wallet, engages in a brief, low-voice conversation, and immediately drives off. This was not a delivery driver. This was not a member of the royal household staff. This was a private courier, operating completely outside the knowledge of the Metropolitan Police officers assigned to the Sandringham perimeter. The implications of this exchange are explosive. Remember, Andrew was formally arrested earlier this year on suspicion of misconduct in public office, specifically surrounding allegations that he used his former role as a UK trade envoy to share confidential state documents and business intelligence with unauthorized private individuals. He was released under active investigation, with strict conditions hovering over his interactions and financial dealings. Seeing him personally receive unvetted, off-the-books documentation at 3 o'clock in the morning on a private royal estate isn't just a minor PR headache for the monarchy. It is a potential legal catastrophe that could pull law enforcement right back to the front doorstep of the royal family. Within hours of the footage leaking online, panic erupted behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace. Sources close to the royal household report that King Charles was briefed on the tape during an emergency morning session, and the reaction was described as pure, unadulterated fury. The king has spent the last 2 years attempting to project an image of a slimmed-down, modern, and financially transparent monarchy. He took massive personal and political heat to strip his own brother of his titles, endure family friction, and clear out Royal Lodge. Every step of that painful process was designed to reassure the British public that the crown was cleaning house. Now this footage makes the king look either completely out of touch or actively complicit in allowing his brother to run a clandestine operation right on the king's own private land. Sandringham isn't state property, it is the private estate of the monarch. Anything that happens on those grounds reflects directly on Charles himself. If Andrew is using Marsh Farm to hide assets, bypass legal scrutiny, or continue off-the-record dealings, the public and Parliament won't just blame the disgraced former prince. They will hold King Charles personally accountable. The outrage across the United Kingdom is already reaching a boiling point. Anti-monarchy groups, parliamentary figures, and legal analysts are openly asking the question: how much longer can the royal family pretend that banishment to a private estate solves the problem? For decades, the public was told that the royals regulate themselves. But every time the curtain is pulled back, whether through court documents, leaked emails, or midnight security tapes, the reality proves that self-regulation is a total myth. What makes this specific leak so dangerous for the House of Windsor is the timing. The monarchy is navigating an incredibly delicate era. The public is facing severe economic pressures, questions about royal funding and private estate tax exemptions are higher than ever, and the younger generation is watching the crown with unprecedented skepticism. The image of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, a man who has evaded formal cross-examination in the United States, settled multi-million-dollar lawsuits out of court, and been stripped of his HRH style, continuing to operate in the shadows of a royal estate with zero accountability, is the ultimate insult to the taxpayer. As the footage continues to circulate globally, accumulating millions of views and sparking fierce debate, the pressure on law enforcement and Buckingham Palace to take immediate action is immense. The palace's initial silence is only fanning the flames. People want real answers. What was inside those crates? Who was in that car? And why is a man who was supposed to be cast out still receiving unchecked midnight deliveries on royal soil? What makes this breach fundamentally different from any previous royal misstep is the sheer scale of the legal network now circling the perimeter. For years, the royal family relied on a proven strategy when dealing with Andrew: manage the press, pay the civil settlements, issue carefully worded statements of regret, and rely on the constitutional buffer of the British Crown to absorb the impact. But the world has fundamentally shifted. The release of millions of pages of unredacted files by international authorities, combined with active criminal inquiries into misconduct in public office, has completely erased the monarch's ability to act as a protective barrier. If the contents of those unmarked crates match the property catalogued during the surrender of Royal Lodge, we are no longer looking at a public relations management issue. We are looking at potential evidence tampering, the unauthorized transfer of disputed assets, and a deliberate attempt to subvert an active police investigation. Legal experts are already pointing out the catastrophic timing of this security breach. Thames Valley Police and Norfolk Constabulary spent months establishing clear parameters following Andrew's arrest and subsequent release under investigation. The primary condition of any high-profile subject remaining free during an ongoing probe into public office misconduct is absolute transparency, zero unaccounted movements, zero off-the-record meetings, and total compliance with judicial oversight. Yet here is the footage. At 3 a.m, on private royal land, a former prince is caught red-handed, facilitating non-routine logistical drops in complete dark. Look closely at the second half of the tape. When that courier hands over the sealed document wallet, Andrew doesn't hand it to an assistant. He doesn't place it on a security table for standard screening. He personally tucks it inside his coat and walks directly toward the residential wing of Marsh Farm. That single action destroys any plausible deniability Buckingham Palace could attempt to construct. They cannot claim he was unaware. They cannot claim it was a routine estate delivery. The body language alone, the frantic glances toward the outer perimeter, the hasty handoff, the immediate departure of the vehicle, reads like an operational handoff straight out of an intelligence briefing. Inside the palace, the fallout is devastating. Senior courtiers who spent months negotiating the terms of Andrew's eviction from Windsor Great Park are reportedly in state of complete disbelief. The move to Norfolk was supposed to be the structural solution. By placing Andrew on the private Sandringham estate, the king believed he could exercise total control over his brother's environment. Sandringham is not open to the public in the way state residences are. It is private family land, surrounded by miles of countryside, explicit no-fly zones, and heavy security infrastructure. It was meant to be a gilded vault. Instead, that very privacy created a blind spot that Andrew appears to have actively exploited. By using the isolated geography of Marsh Farm, he operated away from the constant gaze of the Windsor press corps, believing the cover of darkness and estate security would mask his continued communications. He failed to account for modern surveillance. In an age of high-definition thermal optics, long-range digital recording, and an army of independent investigators monitoring every move around royal perimeters, the idea of keeping a midnight operation secret was pure delusion. The political backlash across Westminster is already exploding. Members of Parliament are preparing to file formal inquiries demanding to know whether state-funded security resources, local police monitoring, or royal estate personnel were used, either knowingly or through gross negligence, to facilitate these unvetted deliveries. Parliament has tolerated royal discretion for generations, but when allegations cross the line into the obstruction of justice or the covert handling of materials linked to international financial scandals, the constitutional immunity wears paper thin. Pressure is mounting exponentially on Prime Minister Keir Starmer's government. Opposition leaders and backbench MPs alike are asking why a citizen currently under active criminal investigation for misconduct in public office is permitted to reside on a private estate with unmonitored access points, while ordinary citizens subject to similar legal scrutiny would face strict bail conditions, electronic monitoring, or total asset freezes. The phrase, "one rule for them, another for us," is no longer just a slogan used by anti-monarchist protesters. It is becoming the dominant consensus across the mainstream political spectrum. Within the royal family itself, the generational divide has fractured into open conflict. Prince William has long advocated for an absolute, permanent severance of all ties with his uncle. Reports originating from Kensington Palace indicate that the Prince of Wales views this latest security disaster not just as a failure of estate management, but as a direct existential threat to his own future reign. For William, every single day that Andrew remains on royal property, using royal infrastructure to conduct shadow business, systematically erodes the legitimacy of the crown that he will one day inherit. William's position is clear and unyielding: total eviction from all royal properties, complete revocation of estate access, and a total public disavowal by the monarchy. But King Charles finds himself trapped in an agonizing personal and constitutional vice. On one side stands his duty as sovereign to protect the integrity of the institution, uphold the rule of law, and listen to an increasingly angry populace. On the other side is the brutal reality of family loyalty, historical precedent, and the terrifying knowledge of what might happen if Andrew is pushed entirely out into the cold, completely unmonitored, with nothing left to lose. The leaked Marsh farm footage has effectively forced the king's hand. The strategy of passive containment is dead. The illusion that moving Andrew to Norfolk would solve the crisis has collapsed in the most public, humiliating fashion imaginable. As law enforcement agencies review this footage frame by frame, the key question is no longer whether Andrew can recover his reputation. That bridge burned down years ago. The real question is whether the House of Windsor can survive the fallout of what is about to come next. When police vans arrive at the gates of Sandringham not to protect the estate, but to execute search warrants on Marsh Farm, the institution will face a constitutional crisis unlike anything seen in modern history. The cameras are rolling, the evidence is out in the open, and the midnight secrets of Marsh Farm are finally coming to light. The reign of silence is over. What makes this security breach an immediate existential crisis for Buckingham Palace is that it shatters the core pillar of King Charles's modernizing agenda: absolute financial and structural transparency. When the king cut off his brother's allowance, stripped his remaining honorifics, and facilitated the move down to Marsh Farm, the public was promised that every aspect of Andrew's living arrangements would be audited, self-contained, and completely accountable. Instead, this footage exposes a glaring, dangerous reality. 5 miles of Norfolk marshland and private estate fencing have simply created a lawless buffer zone where the rules of normal governance do not seem to apply. Look at the political reality unfolding right now. Parliament is returning to session under immense domestic pressure. Economically,